Welcome to a chapter reading of Phoenix Insurgent, written by Bolshevik Muppet 99 and narrated by Elethiomel. Please consider supporting the original author. Thanks for tuning in and enjoy. Chapter 2. Gellert goggled at Albus, certain he had misheard. There was no way at all, that Albus had just said that. No chance. Albus smiled slightly at his confusion, nodding his head an inch. "You were right," he repeated. Gellert shook his head, his unkempt hair flying every which way. "They tell me I wasn't," he said, his voice trembling with barely controlled rage. "You told me I wasn't. Hundreds of times in your letters. That was, in fact, the only real substance to your communication, telling me how wrong I was." "Gellert," Albus started, raising a hand. He was on his feet in an instant, his hands curling into fists. "You come here after 50 years and tell me that I was right? You wait until I can barely sleep because of the visions of the dead, and then you waltz in here and tell me I was right? How dare you?" "Gellert, 50 million dead, Albus! That is all my brilliance led to. Yes, Europe would have erupted without me. Yes, the Germans would have embarked in their madness without me. But without me, the scale would have been far less. Without my genius, they would never—" "Everything you did with the Muggle world was an atrocious abomination," Albus agreed, with a calm nod. "You should never have involved yourself in their affairs, not the way you did. But the Wizarding world. The Wizarding world has proven it is not ready for democracy." The wind quite taken out of his sails, Gellert sat heavily back onto his stool. "Taking the treatment quite harshly, are you?" he asked with a wild laugh. "Enough is enough," Albus said, his voice ringing with quiet strength. The phoenix stretched its wings, leaping off of Albus's shoulder and soaring through the hole in the wall. "Oh, Albus, you should see yourself now, all inflated with righteous anger, so willing to cast aside your morals. What was it you said?" Suddenly, Gellert was on his feet, jumping over to the haphazard pile of worn books lying near his bed. "Where is it?" he muttered, poring through the tomes. "Where did I— Aha!" His back gave a click as he straightened up with the yellowing parchment crushed in his hand. He waved it triumphantly, baring his brown teeth in an ape-like grin. "December 1974, he said, "before I started believing you about my mistakes. Your words, Albus." He began to read in an exaggerated mockery of Albus's tone. "Your mistake, my friend, and mine as well, in our time together, was believing that we have the right to make decisions for our fellow residents of this world. We may be more powerful and more intelligent, but our choices can be just as incorrect as anyone else's. We have no more right to choose for others than they do to choose for us. Democracy, Gellert. Democracy is the answer. The people must speak for themselves. They must not become mere slaves to the whims of those gifted by chance." He looked up at Albus, his eyes narrowing. "So, Supreme Mugwump, Chief Warlock, Headmaster of Hogwarts, and whatever else you claim as a title. The people have spoken. They have cast you aside, and you should have the good grace to accept the decision." "They are fools," Albus said bluntly. "Corrupt fools who prefer lining their pockets to dealing with Voldemort while there's still time." Gellert waved a careless hand, pacing in front of his bed. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. You don't get to decide now that I was right. You don't get to do so. If the Ministry continues ignoring Voldemort, forget about your miserable Voldemort! Gellert shouted, his eyes bulging. If you'd have stood by me, there would have been no one to stop us. The death toll would have been in the hundreds of millions. Maybe you could have prevented my more inhumane decisions. Or maybe I would have sunk to a level far beyond yours. You could have stopped me! You could have stopped me earlier! Why didn't you? Gellert dropped onto his bed with a thud, his hands rising to cover his face as he began to shake with pent-up sobs. Millions! Millions! I see them! I hear them! They weep in the night! You could have stopped it! You left me to ruin myself, to ruin Europe, and you left me to it! I should have come earlier, but I was afraid. Not like you to be afraid of death. I never was. But now I know. I know what is waiting for me. The dead are patient. I know that. It wasn't death I was afraid of. It was victory. Victory and knowledge. Gellert looked up sharply, his eyes focusing on the wand in Albus's hand. Ah, that. You thought you would beat me and that you would be propelled into rule, knowledge. He trailed off, searching Albus's face for a hint, any hint of what he meant. His eyes widened as he understood, and he began to laugh again. You thought... Ariana, you thought I knew. I take it you do not. Albus, he said, wiping his eyes. Ariana was one girl. Even if I ever knew, the millions on my conscience have erased even her face. I can barely even recall any individual death. His eyes unfocused for a moment, turning misty in remembrance. So many. They all blur into each other. One after another, after another. He shook his head, focusing on Dumbledore. So, Voldemort has truly returned. You are not a senile, deluded madman set on destroying Britain. I am not senile or deluded. Voldemort has regained a body. Flesh of his servant, bone of his father, blood of his enemy. Interesting, Gellert muttered. Very interesting. That could... Yes. I could see how that could work. He looked up again, catching Albus's eye. And your little militia? I have reformed the Order of the Phoenix. But with the Ministry denying Voldemort's return and vilifying me, anyone seen to be supporting me is automatically suspect. And, of course, I am now a wanted criminal. He tapped his finger against his lip, thoughtfully. Quite a few of us are, actually. It's rather amusing, in a terrible way. And what do you want with me? With you? Albus smiled. Why, I want your help, of course. No. Why not? Come now, Gellert. You get to help kill an immortal dark wizard and rehabilitate a dysfunctional society. Albus winked. I'm quite certain you'll even have opportunities for murder and torture. I would have thought you'd be jumping for joy. No. Just leave me to my punishment. It's what I deserve. What you deserve, Albus said, is to help make amends. Help me destroy Voldemort. Help me fix up Britain. And then you can return to your lonely cell. Do you not understand? He snarled. I still want to do all of that. But I cannot. I cannot trust myself. I never planned, in the beginning, to do half the things I ended up doing. I never wanted to, but I did. I cannot trust myself. I cannot trust myself not to damn myself more than I already am. Do you remember the day by the lake? Albus asked. I don't think we'd met more than 2 weeks before then. Do you remember it? Of course I do. I said that we would be damning ourselves if we carried out your plans. Do you remember your reply? Albus, you said that better for 2 to destroy themselves than for an entire world to do so. And I was a fool. A naive, arrogant fool. I did not know. Come now, Gellert. Just join me. Together we can save the world from itself. One would think you'd walked in here through the front door the way you're talking. Für das größere Wohl. Is that it, Albus? Albus just inclined his head slightly. What makes you think I won't turn on you the first chance I get? What makes you think I won't claim the wand back from you? Albus smiled, his eyes twinkling. Well, mostly because I know you. Knew you, I should say. If you are talking in the biblical sense, you will find that it was mostly I who... Betrayal in an underhanded fashion, that isn't you. Albus continued serenely. Oh, you might challenge me to a duel if our relationship were to devolve, but you are not one to slit my throat while I sleep. As if you would even get the chance. You know me many, many years ago, Gellert whispered. A lifetime ago. I know you well enough to be certain of this. You would not betray me. Not when I offer you a chance to make real, lasting change. The last time I tried, you were driven by pure intentions, but you were quickly twisted. I will not allow that to happen this time. Gellert shook his head, clasping his hands together to keep their excited shaking hidden. We cannot be trusted with such power. What makes you think that you will not be twisted just as I was? Albus raised his wand in answer, holding it horizontally. I have carried this for 51 years, he said, and still I have ignored its every whisper. It is not the same, I know, but I am practiced at rising above my baser desires. A flush of crimson gold disturbed the air, and a fiery feather appeared, dropping neatly into Albus's outstretched hand. Ah, he said. It would seem the guards have noticed the gaping hole in their utterly secure prison. They must be making their way up the stairs now. What say you, Gellert? The old thrill of an approaching fight filled him, the joyous fire beginning to make his blood boil. He started stretching his hand out toward Albus's, and hesitated, the screams of the dying echoing momentarily in his ears. I know you want to, Albus said. I know you long for it, and this time, Gellert, you truly will be in the right. Gellert took his hand. He felt the magic swirling around him as Albus waved his wand, slithing neatly through all the enchantments that bound him to this cell. And then he felt free. Freer than he had been for decades. Where's the phoenix? He asked. If it takes much longer to remove us from here, the guards will arrive. Fawkes will be here in his own time, Albus said, looking supremely unconcerned, his hand warm in Gellert's. And it will be good for the guards to arrive. You need a wand. They will see you. Albus quirked an eyebrow. I know. They stood like that for a few minutes, facing the door with hands clasped, Albus looking as relaxed and confident as he had just before they duelled, all those years ago. Slowly, the voices began to filter in from outside the cell door, out-of-breath shouts and curses as the guards drew near. Stand back, Albus said, releasing his hand. I'm perfectly fine where I am, Gellert snapped. Of course you are. Oh, I believe I forgot to mention. When I said Voldemort is immortal, I wasn't being glib. I'm not yet certain how many, but I know he has made Horcruxes. Several of them. Some of his distaste must have shown on his face, because Albus laughed. It sounded as joyous and full of life as it always had in his memories. Fun, isn't it? The door burst open. The guards had arrived. Harry scowled at his plate of eggs, cutting them into far smaller pieces than was strictly necessary. Umbridge, it seemed, was doing whatever she could to make Hogwarts a living hell for him. One by one, she was taking everything he cared about from him. No Quidditch, no DA, no communications with Sirius, no Dumbledore. He was half convinced that she would try and split Ron and Hermione away from him, if only to increase his misery. At least Dumbledore had made it out all right, after promising to explain everything. When exactly that mysterious time for explanations would come, Harry didn't know. But something about the way Dumbledore had promised made him feel sure that it wouldn't be too much longer. Next to him, Hermione and Ron were angrily talking about Marietta. Ron was far more vocal, but he could still hear the rage lurking under Hermione's voice. He didn't join in, sure that if he even started thinking too much about the traitor, he would be shouting. Further down the table, he could hear Seamus whispering to Lavender that Fudge had been taken to St. Mungo's after Dumbledore was through with him. He snorted around a mouthful of eggs, wishing that something as incredible as that had happened. He allowed his mind to wander for a few minutes, thinking about what Fudge would have looked like if he really had been left with a pumpkin for a head, as he'd heard someone claim. It was better than thinking about that feeling he'd had when Dumbledore had spoken to him, that snake-like urge to bite into the elderly wizard. If Voldemort isn't possessing me, he thought, then what is it? He glanced up at the head table without thinking, so used to looking to Dumbledore when he had problems. Umbridge was sitting in Dumbledore's seat. She caught Harry's eyes and smiled wildly, her jowls shivering. A burning fury shot through him, a sudden image filling his mind of him running up to that thing and just punching her, wiping the horrific frog-like grin from her face. His seething rage settled like acid in his belly, his hands curling into fists around his knife and fork. He could not think of anyone in that moment who he hated more than Umbridge. Not Malfoy, not Snape, not even Wormtail or Voldemort. He stared back at her with a clenched jaw, not giving her the satisfaction of seeing how upset she'd made him. An enormous flurry of wings broke his gaze as dozens of owls bearing copies of the Daily Prophet came flooding through the hall. He looked back at his plate, forcing himself to eat even though the food seemed to have no taste. A loud murmur of excited conversation suddenly filled the hall. He heard Ron exclaim something that would have made Mrs. Weasley wash his mouth out with soap. Ron was looking down at Hermione's copy of the Prophet with a look of horrified fascination. Hermione herself was just staring at it with wide eyes, not even bothering to chide Ron for his language. All around the hall, everyone who had received a newspaper was staring at it in shock. Harry scooted closer and looked. Fugitive Headmaster frees infamous foe. In the early hours of this morning, Normangard Prison, see page 4, was broken into for the first time in history, resulting in its deadliest captive being released. Gellert Grindelwald, one of the most feared dark wizards of all time, escaped, leaving over a dozen guards and aurors unconscious in his wake. The Daily Prophet can confirm that Albus Dumbledore, former Chief Warlock of the Wizengamot and Headmaster of Hogwarts, was involved in this escape. The article continued for several pages, describing Grindelwald's crimes and the duel in which Dumbledore had defeated him, and wondering at length why Dumbledore had released him. Harry got halfway through the article before he looked up, a grim smile trying to break out on his face. Everyone at the head table was engrossed in the article. McGonagall looked like she had swallowed a brick. Snape's face was an odd shade of puce. Flitwick was staring at the paper without moving an inch, and Sprout looked like she was going to vomit. And Umbridge had gone white as snow, her eyes wide with fear, her hand shaking so badly that pumpkin juice sloshed over the side of her goblet. Harry laughed until he cried. Hello there, this is Elethiomel. You just finished listening to a chapter of Phoenix Insurgent by Bolshevik Muppet 99. If you liked this episode, please consider supporting the original story and sharing this episode with your friends and family. I would also like to thank Leo Deka for the remix of the Hörverlag jingle from the German Harry Potter audiobooks, Vladislav Pantic for the amazing artwork Albus, Percival, Wulfric, Brian, Dumbledore, and Tristan for helping me with the recording. All relevant links can be found in the video description. Thank you for listening.